I'm Anna Kita, and this is episode 1 of my new podcast in which my friends and I discuss the news and politics. This is my little assistant. She mostly just attacks my laptop. Um, I am calling this project Tank Top Psyop. Yes, that is the name. When I think back to the list of names that I had brainstormed or brain deaded, I'm glad that we are not calling it Shock Jock Tour or the Scarlet Women Liberation Front. A bit about our group. We are an international group of internet friends. We met almost 2 years ago now in another group of thing we were all a fan of. Then it kind of evolved into a different group. Eventually, there were some bannings. I'll admit I was banned every time from everything, but my friends stood by me every single time, and so I love them and I'm proud of them because we have several times now proven our commitment to principles like democracy, rejecting the scapegoating of vulnerable people or people who are otherwise in the minority, standing up to elitism, hierarchies, multiple kinds of misogyny, and doing so when it's not easy, when standing up for something means likely retribution or being outright ostracized. So I'm very proud of our record of good trouble. I don't think there's really any progress without some level of good trouble. Anyway, we recorded this on June 27th, 2024. I was joined by Bradley and Rick, and we discussed the very, very terrible news of the day before. Let's start with a very disappointing figure. Share my screen. Let's see. There we go.
Are we talking about John Fetterman?
Yes.
Oh man.
I was not very specific.
He's trash.
Yes, unfortunately, he used to be very charming. He used to seem like somebody who had, empathy. Although I have some comments about that later. So anyway, very unsurprisingly, he met with Netanyahu, and they had a nice photo op. And as you can see, as Israel has no better friend. I mean, I guess there is a lot of terrible competition there, but I can't think of anybody else who's cloaked himself in a flag or potentially torpedoed his entire fan base just based on stubbornness on one issue. And like it's like,
look, the man can't drive. He's got no business behind the wheel.
Can he not drive?
I mean,
no, he can't. He got another ticket. He crashed into somebody.
Yes, I heard about that. So how far back I know that he has a history of accidents.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I know
he drives badly.
I was trying to find out if any serious accidents predated the stroke, because the other day when we were discussing John Fetterman, Rodrigo, who's a friend of ours, suggested that perhaps there was a correlation between his stroke and his conservatism, and he followed it up by actually saying that I guess he sort of admitted it in an interview or mentioned it I don't have the particular interview on hand, but like he he was fairly open about like, yes, I did turn right, and that after I had a stroke, and I've taken an entire semester of medical neurology, and so I can say, with my I can make a barely educated hypothesis that there is actually a basis for that. What I am not saying is that, conservatism means that you are cognitively impaired. That is not how it works. But
I'm saying.
yeah, but there have been lots of studies, and this is not new, that have shown that conservatism, or people who are inclined towards conservatism, are more they're more reactionary. They're more prone to fear, anger, emotions that don't put you in don't exactly put you in a state where you're thinking objectively. Okay, here I pulled up a couple of articles. Peer-reviewed research shows that conservatives are generally more sensitive to threat, while this threat bias can distort reality, fuel irrational fears, and make one more vulnerable to fear-mongering. Politicians, it can also promote hypervigilance, perhaps making one better to handle an immediate threat. I don't know that that's okay. So they're more that. So they're more likely to physically defend themselves if they think there's a threat. Okay, well, that would explain some incidents. That would explain some police behavior. They tend to focus on the negative. I mean, admittedly, so do I. Okay, stronger physiological response to threats. And there's another article here that talks about how they tend to have a larger amygdala, which is a structure in the limbic system that is responsible for anxiety disorders, phobias, and a number of automatic survival responses, the 5 Fs. I think it's involved with fight, flight, fear, friend, flop. So, when you freeze in response to certain threats, then that involves your amygdala and your overall limbic system. And hang on. Okay, so here's okay. I think this is the article I meant. Liberals. Okay, let's just say I would assume that means people who are left of center tend to have a larger, more active cingulate gyrus, which is responsible for conflict detection, as well as taking in new information and understanding its impact while making decisions. This could make liberals more likely to approach issues with heightened sensitivity, and conservatives have a larger and more active amygdala. Yeah, as I said, this is responsible for fear processing information and activating the fight or flight response. It is expected that someone with this feature will be influenced by fear when making decisions. Psychologists have also found that conservatives prefer stability and structure. I think 'cause I've done research projects on conspiratorial thinking, which is a little different. It involves some other personality traits and cognitive processes. But I think that one of the things I recall that they both have in common was a preference for hierarchies. And so that,
Mhm.
Yeah, here we go.
yeah. Okay. So there's a correlation between I think it's fair to say emotional dysregulation and conservatism. And so one cause can be a larger and sensitive amygdala, most personality disorders that involve mood dysregulation. A lot of that occurs in the limbic region, which is where the amygdala is. I think there's also some activity in the prefrontal cortex, but that's a region that handles somewhat more sophisticated tasks. It also empathy, and so strokes, I would say unsurprisingly, can also cause emotional dysregulation. My understanding is that it would have to entail some degree of damage, either in the limbic system or the prefrontal cortex. I know that Fetterman has been pretty open about how his doctor explained that any impairments would likely involve auditory processing, which I believe he has an electronic aid for. Like he has trouble. I think he has trouble parsing words when people speak to him, and so he has like a listening device. He also
Look,
has.
I'm not here to understand the man. I'm here to slander him.
All right, I'll zoom through it. So the point I was trying to make there was that that suggests that that takes place in a different region. I think it's the temporal lobe, but that doesn't rule out that there could be deficits in other regions. It is close to the prefrontal cortex. I did mean to ask my psychiatrist about this earlier to give a more informed answer, but yeah, so you have a basis for emotional dysregulation, making someone more vulnerable to conservatism, and then you have somebody who has a significant brain injury. Like it could. I actually read at one point it could have killed him. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, too bad.
So I think that yeah, there is a scientific, research-based basis for either Fetterman or somebody who experiences something similar to have such a change in their thinking, personality, or beliefs as a result of a stroke or another type of brain injury. And something like a car accident would absolutely contribute to that. Like I would imagine that probably car accidents would be more likely to cause damage in the prefrontal area, just considering that's what region of your head is going to hit the windshield or the dashboard, etc. And so yeah, it's interesting. And then I've done a lot of research on conspiratorial thinking, which I'd which I'd love also to bring up at some point. Inevitably, it's going to come up because that we live in a time when facts are whatever people want them to be. So
Hey, Bradley, what's your hot takes on this Fetterman dude?
Oh, Fetterman? So he is probably the second most disappointing thing to come out of Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah.
What's the first is Shane Gillis. He's the first. It's disappointing to see just the heel turn this guy took. Because I remember when he was running, and he was advertised to be like, this progressive dude who didn't wear suits because the big and tall section didn't have his, size. And he was all like, F the establishment. And I'm pretty sure people in the spaces I frequented, they were saying like, oh, he's the next Bernie Sanders. And, and it's kind of our fault for falling for it because
Real.
I mean, yeah, maybe the stroke kind of had an influence on his thinking, but I think, this is who he always was.
I think the AIPAC had a lot of influence on his thinking.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, like he
Started
always
seeing green.
like like he always was pro-Israel, and like, a
Oh
lot.
yeah.
I mean, I think that everybody's scared of AIPAC. Like there are other.
I don't think he was ever scared of it. I think that not well, we know
Yeah,
now
they
that
just
he's
sponsored him.
always aligned. Yeah, like he was aligned with their policies. Like,
Yeah,
Fetterman's like, yeah, I'm all about this.
progressive except
But
for Israel, I think.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Um,
he, he wore it. He wore it well. And, and by it I mean like, that progressive patina that,
Oh yeah.
kind of had most of us fooled who weren't really paying attention. And when this giant goes walking through Congress and he's all like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
in
I
his
hate
shorts and
progressives."
stuff.
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's
it
just
was
like
lovable what a
he's
slob
like,
he was.
yeah,
Yep.
and it's like, well, and he's like, "Well, I hate progressives." Like he's never actually said that, but he might as well have. It was
Well,
like
yeah. Well, he
kind of
used
like a
to
little bit of
say
slap in the.
yes. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh
He
no,
used
yeah,
to say I am a progressive, and I believe he's said I am not a progressive now, and that was
yes, oh yeah,
what less than a year, with that heel.
yeah. No, it was, and unfortunately, there's people I talk to who are also like, well, what about Jamal Bowman? And it's kind of like Jamal Bowman went to Israel and he saw what was happening. He's like, oh shit, this is bad. Right. And he came back and he's like, yeah, I changed my mind. Fetterman went to Israel and he's like, yeah, no, I like this.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Well, I guess it's on which side of the AIPAC money you're on, right? Like Jamal Bowman
oh
got
yeah.
outspent,
Yeah.
whereas Fetterman
Unfortunately.
is
But
like,
mind
I'll
you,
take every dollar you'll give me. So
but that was before, like, and when I say before, like Jamal Bowman's visit was like before, like, he was getting courted by APAC. And like I feel like his like not really a turn, but like kind of like his enlightenment came to like realizing what like a lot of what I hope that a lot of black politicians realize, like, wow, this what's happening here in Gaza, in Israel, is very familiar. Like, it hits pretty close to home. So I'm not gonna support this. So
Yeah. Like
yeah, Bowman was right on about that. He saw it and he says, "Nah, man." But
mm.
yeah.
now he's not in Congress anymore. So
Well,
Like I don't know what if whether or not here's my new kittens here lying in my papers. What personal
that's
connection.
not true. I sorry, he's in Congress
mhm.
until his term is up.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't know whether or not Fetterman has any personal ties to Israel. I can imagine having family there might make it a little more difficult. Although
Does he? Like
although
I don't
speaking as an American, like I
Does
don't
he have? Yeah, I don't know. Is that right?
I,
um
I have
well,
I have no
maybe like
idea.
Netanyahu's from Pennsylvania, so I think maybe he saw him and he's like, oh, there's another pencil knight like me.
Well, I mean, like during his campaign, I read his backstory. He was actually, born into a relatively wealthy family that was somewhat
Sus.
like conservative with a small c. And that was something that he ended up abandoning. He did I think he was a community organizer for a while. It sounded like he was a genuinely down to earth person, at least for a while. And like I would like to think that I'm pretty good at judging when somebody is genuine, but I've made
I don't care about who they are on the inside or their heart. Well, the only thing that matters is their voting record. And up until he
right.
joined the Senate, like he didn't look like the conservative he is now. He did a heel turn, exactly like Bradley said. It was you wouldn't have any evidence that he was a conservative ahead of it.
Mhm.
Well, I think I guess my argument for it does kind of matter a bit, what is in their head, whether or not they have empathy. Like there are no glamorous rewards for being somebody who's a lawmaker or in politics, who is there for their convictions. Like, firstly, it's more of an uphill battle, if you're not going to accept bribes, and then you're also going to get attacked, in this case by AIPAC. But even if AIPAC weren't an issue, there'd be other kinds of lobbies. I mean, like, just, like, even Bernie Sanders, like, for instance, like when he was I think he crafted legislation so that they could audit the Pentagon. I was looking for a news story so that I could tell my friend about it, and all of it was tilted in a negative light. Something that I wouldn't think would be a controversial thing, at least not for, like, MSNBC. But I guess they really don't. Not many people or not many outlets want to say anything positive about Bernie, and I would say that it's pretty considerably worse for squad members who have not been in politics as long. Lots of them are women. Lots of them are people of color. I mean, just, the attacks on, like, AOC's intelligence to start with. Like, it, like, I'm grateful that, like, we now have, quite a few people in Congress now, one less, who have, maintained their pledge to not take super PAC money. But like, I can't imagine, how difficult that is. I mean, like, especially, when the whole point is to, survive politically so that you can be there to represent the people you work for. And anyway, speaking of AIPAC and horrible people, I've even so I did a lot of this itinerary before election day, and I've been wanting to talk about George Latimer a lot, just on the basis of, like, how, like, lame. I mean, he's, for anybody who isn't that familiar with Israel or doesn't follow the news that much, like, politicians talking about Israel, it's like a magic 8-ball. Like, it's just speaking in, like, there's a list of platitudes, that you can choose, or a talking point for, for any, given, somebody saying, it is wrong to slaughter women and children, or, how is it that, there are 400 casualties in an operation to, rescue 4 hostages, and these, very, precise, well-crafted military operations that are almost surgical, that kill 5 villages, and sometimes their own hostages. But anyway, so here,
You mean to tell me the most moral, ethical army in the world would kill their own hostages?
yes, and I'm
Shame.
sure they're very, very torn up about it.
Okay.
And like, there's no way they would have, denied it or tried to cover it up.
Oh no.
Anyway, here's a clip that'll show, compare and contrast the debate skills, and other aspects of these two candidates. It's a majority report clip because they already commented on this a while ago when it was fresh news, but nonetheless, I mean, I think it speaks for itself.
Right now about Israel's war with Hamas, gentlemen. It began with the Hamas terror attack, as you know, in Israel back on October 7th, claiming the lives of 1,200 Israelis.
That's when it began.
Concerns have now been raised about the number of civilians killed in the ensuing fighting in Gaza. Mr. Latimer, the closest that we've gotten to your stance on this is a clip from last December. Take a look right here.
That's why I say you use the word genocide. Be very careful what you're saying, because what genocide was gas chambers and people who are herded into a building.
Folks, I hate asking for money.
Oh, Joe, not
It's my
right
least
now.
favorite part of
Come
running for office. I know how hard you work.
For the purpose of being killed.
In the months since you made that comment, there have been thousands of additional civilian casualties reported in Gaza. So we ask you now, is what's happening on the ground in Gaza a genocide? You have 60 seconds.
No, it is not genocide. Let me tell you what it is. It is the unwillingness of Hamas to sit down at the table. President Biden and Secretary Blinken offered a program this very week that had the support of the United Nations, also had the support of Israel's willingness to go along with it. Hamas has to release hostages. All of this began because of the horrific action on October 7th. The way that people went in and raped women, murdered
Pause it
people.
for a second. This is demonstrably untrue. Now, I mean, even Thomas Friedman today, the day after he says this, Thomas Friedman has said the problem is Israel is not willing to end this war. Hamas is willing to give the hostages, return the hostages to end the war. Israel has taken a position that is completely non-negotiable. You cannot say we're going to negotiate with the party sitting across from us, and the first term that must be agreed to is that that party goes away
or dies.
Well, that's what I mean.
Eliminated.
Dies, eliminated, whatever. That party does not exist, and that's not a negotiation. There's no partner for peace there. There's nothing.
And Latimer is also lying about what genocide actually entails. Let's be clear that the Holocaust was one of the worst crimes against humanity and one of the worst genocides in the history of humanity. But does it needs to include gas chambers? That's the case. Then that means that the Bangladesh genocide is not a genocide, that the Cambodian genocide is not a genocide, that, the Rwandan genocide, the Bosnian genocide, Darfur, all of these things that have been legally defined as genocide under international law wouldn't count, because apparently genocide is only the one that we have in our cultural memory, where the United States gets to look like the moral high ground in that instance because we're on the good side in fighting the Nazis.
Yeah, Emma.
Because that happened within.
Also, something I wanted to mention was that, as you guys know, I think it's been reported that Netanyahu, big shocker, was intentionally sabotaging negotiations by including in every deal that you need to let us completely eliminate Hamas. Then this is who he's negotiating with. So, we have to. So you have to agree.
Yeah, it's a poison pill
going
deal.
to kill all of you,
Mm-hmm.
among other things. But anyway.
Well, he's not. I mean, he doesn't. I hate to boil this down before your clip is over, but in my humble opinion, the genocide was always the point. They always wanted to clear out from Gaza. They've always wanted to clear out the Palestinians from the West Bank. They want that territory and they want it white for them. That's it.
Yes.
There is no other solution that can be acceptable. So
yeah, no, I very much agree with that. And
because when I say that, I'm sorry, but it's like
that's okay. I was going to say there's more evidence for that now, which
because the IDF decided to go back up north to the northern part of Gaza, which they previously declared to be Hamas free, but now they're going we missed some. We got to go back.
And also,
if they have to kill 100 Palestinians to get one Hamas, well, that's just what you got to do.
like, I don't have a source for this momentarily, but I believe that their definition of a Hamas fighter is just a male Palestinian. Like,
Oh yeah, that's what they're using very loose definitions. They can just fit anything.
so when they get you know, say they've killed I don't know, 1,000 Hamas fighters, that just means that they have killed 1,000 Palestinian men.
Oh, I wouldn't be
Meaningless.
surprised if every once in a while they get somebody who, you know, is committing a terrorist attack, but you know, all you're doing is making more terrorists. And you know, Latimer
Yes, and
let
they
you
know
know
that.
in his clip back in December, he's like, don't use genocide because
There weren't
then
gas
they
chambers.
look bad. Yeah, yeah. It's not,
I
it's
mean, like,
such a thin gruel that they're serving at this point that like it's not, you don't have to be all that smart to see through it.
Also, by that logic, certain states in America have committed genocide because gas chambers have been a form of capital punishment. So,
Oh, hell yeah.
so let's watch the rest.
That's a good take.
Yeah.
He denied until it was impossible for him to continue to deny it. If you can get Hamas to release those prisoners, you can get a cessation of the military action and humanitarian aid. And that is the intelligent way to go forward in peace. When you call 3 days after the attack for ceasefire, what you're really saying is, we want Hamas to keep the hostages, and now we want to start negotiating. That's not a responsible position that he's taken.
Mr. Latimer, thank you. Mr. Bowman, in November, you were outside the White House when you said this about the war. Take a listen.
We should conduct ourselves as a diplomatic democracy, not as a nation that supports and condones just the slaughter of tens of thousands of civilians and almost 10,000 children. We are allowing babies to be killed because of our policies.
So, Mr. Bowman, are you saying that the White House is condoning genocide? You have 60 seconds here.
I'm saying the United States Congress
Yes.
should not be sending weapons to Israel at this time because according to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, there is a plausible genocide happening in Gaza right now. We need a permanent ceasefire, which includes
That's still
the
thin
release of the
gruel.
hostages, as I have stated multiple times, humanitarian aid getting into Gaza right now because a famine is setting in. We have almost 40,000 dead. We have 16,000 children dead, and we have hundreds of thousands injured. He won't even acknowledge the existence of the Palestinian people, and he will not say Palestine because he wants to erase them from the consciousness of the American people. Say Palestine. Acknowledge Palestinian people. Let me see you do that.
Mr.
Rebuttal?
Mr. I'm going to come to you in 1 second, but Mr. Bowman, I want to stay with you for 1 second
Okay.
here because I heard you say Congress, but is the White House condoning genocide was the question. 15 seconds.
Is the White House condoning genocide?
Are you saying
I would like for President Biden to do more to make sure we are not sending weapons to Israel at this time, and especially Benjamin Netanyahu, who has evoked language that is genocidal, just like President Herzog has evoked language that is genocidal, and that's why international charges are being brought against Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay, Mr. Bowman, thank you. Mr. Latimer, coming to you for 30-second
Yeah,
report
I
here.
think it's important to understand that the biggest reason why you have the casualties, Hamas created a terrorist attack, no different than what happened on 9/11 here in New York, where 3,000 New Yorkers died. And in that response to that, Israel did not move into Gaza immediately. And during that period of time, what Hamas did cynically was to put their citizens in between the military force and hide the hostages and put those civilians out there to be killed. I can say the word Palestine. Can you say the word truth? Mr. Bowman.
Oh,
Idiot. All right. But I want to say, Bradley, you're so right when you said,
just to be released in the beginning. He denied that
sorry.
they were
That's still
atrocities.
sorry.
when you said he was changed man when he went to Israel. When I saw him outside the White House, they were interviewing him there. I just anecdotally, I heard a man who definitely was speaking from his heart. He was like, they're killing babies. They're, you know, he was, and like he's a little soft pedaling stuff here in this debate because he doesn't want to come off too extreme. And I don't support that, but I understand why he's doing it. Didn't matter anyway.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah.
But
Poised, he's compassionate. It all sounds reasonable to me. He's not citing any events that were part of the New York Times stories that turned out to be unsubstantiated. And like, I said a magic 8-ball earlier, it's like
Yeah.
you write some talking points and you put them into a hat, like, October 7th, Hamas won't release the hostages, Hamas won't negotiate, Hamas uses people as human shields, and you just pick one in response to, any given criticism about the number of casualties who are children and women, casualties who were raising their hands or waving a white flag, and it's just so appalling that you have it's not AIPAC, getting good candidates primaried is nothing new. They were the reason that Nina Turner lost. They spent a lot of money against her. But here you have just this candidate that is so bad, so lame, so non-genuine. He's like almost like just this, this straw man 8-ball, who just answers in platitudes, compared to this actual person who's humanitarian, who I believe doesn't take super PAC money, who has represented the working people in his district. Like, there shouldn't be any amount of money that can get somebody like this elected. And
I think Bowman is a bit of a flawed candidate. He's not good enough on a national stage. He pulled that stupid fire alarm, and they were able to make hay out of it, shit like that. But he is an honest, like, he seems as honest a leftist congressperson as anybody. So we are the Congress is less left when he leaves it, for sure.
Yes, and it's not as if it's ever been, I wouldn't say it's ever been anywhere near left.
No, but he was part of that. He was expanding that coalition, and he won't be there anymore, and that's unfortunate. But definitely believe him. I believe him when he says, he's like, their baby's being killed. He doesn't sound like a man who's just like, I want your vote.
He doesn't sound like a politician. Yeah.
Okay, so thinking a lot. I don't know if we're moving away from the subject, but I'm pretty sure that Bowman was around during the the 80s and 90s crack epidemic. Like,
was he? I don't know.
Maybe. Like, how old is he? Maybe not.
I don't know how old he is.
But it is, for anyone who knows, it is undoubtedly, known as like a CIA plot today. And that's just not even conspiracy. Like, there's actual documents out. There was like something called the Dark Alliance, which was basically, the US government's complicity in letting crack flow into New York, specifically into Black neighborhoods. And it's comparable to what is happening in Israel, right? The idea was inundate these places, make the population undesirable, so that way we can get rid of them, and then, like what they're probably going to do to Gaza once this is done, turn it into waterfront property. But luckily that didn't have too much of an impact in New York or in most places that I'm talking about. But it, I know a political science teacher, not the one that we know, but I know one, and I asked, like, how does this war in Gaza end? Like, what does the end look like? And I could see in his eyes, he's just like, this is not good, like, just not good. All these people are gonna die. The ones who stay.
I mean, the end with Gaza being part of Israel.
Yeah.
And
the people who stay are gonna die. So,
Well, yeah, they've I think it shouldn't be controversial at this point, to say that it is very obvious that they are making it uninhabitable.
Yeah.
And as to what you said about the crack epidemic and it, about it not being a conspiracy theory, that's absolutely right. And it was actually, related to one of our many coups in Latin America. I believe it was Nicaragua.
Yes.
Against the Sandinista rebellion, to help the fascist, I believe, or authoritarian, violent contras.
Something along that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Bowman saw like he went down to Gaza and he saw and he's like, oh shit, the same thing is happening here.
Mhm.
It's just, they're shooting them instead of like doping them up.
Mhm.
I would say like it might just be strictly humanitarian. He may not need to have that frame of reference of like, hey, this is just, he might just be like, holy shit, what are they doing here? These babies with their heads blown off. We can't support this.
Crazy.
Oh yeah, like I'm sure that like morally he would have been equally disgusted, but
also I think he's predisposed
there's
to
a parallel between
I think as a leftist, he's predisposed to support Palestinian liberation, and then to go there and see what's being done to those people. I'm not surprised his resolve was hardened in the face of a primary challenge. It's unfortunate he lost, but you got to give him the credit for sticking to that particular. Like no amount of pressure from losing an election was going to change his opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. And so.
Give him credit.
It took
he died standing up.
Yes, and it took quite a lot for them to get him down. In fact, as they on Indisputable, they made a great video that, among other things, they revealed that this is the most AIPAC has ever spent to.
Yeah.
How much did they spend on this, by the way?
It was like 15 mil.
I believe it was
loses
tens of millions.
New York primary to George Vladimir. What is going on here? Okay, there's the voice, the powerful, passionate person and then another guy who jumped in. According to News One, incumbent New York Congressman Jamal Bowman has lost his primary election Tuesday night to an accused Democrat, and we say that because it's really a name only. So.
Also,
we'll give you the rest
they're going to talk about
this.
other
George Vladimir, whose campaign received record funding from a powerful conservative lobby in a race that was replete with racist dog whistles and attacks. That's who's going to be representing you.
There were a lot of those.
Maybe.
With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called
During the most expensive House primary ever. Well, you wanted him out of there. You wanted him silenced, didn't you? And no amount of money was going to be too much to get him out of there. Let's give you the rest of this. New York-based lawyer, activist. She's become one of my favorites because she's unapologetic and well-researched. Ole Olerin would react online. And you see it there. She talks about the money. Nearly $25 million was spent on the.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Just look at her posting there on X. Because he dared call for a ceasefire. Wow. Talks about Vladimir's seat being bought and paid for and a dangerous undermining of democracy. And that's where I land. I like Bowman. I like Jamal Bowman. It's not about that. It's far worse than that. It's about silencing people. As said, nearly 25 million spent on the primary, including nearly 15 million alone from AIPAC, powerful Israel lobby that typically attaches itself to Republican candidates.
What I could tell you I know about is that this was the first time AIPAC used a super PAC, and it was in a primary race. They haven't used because they needed to raise, they spent that much money to defeat Bowman. It really was a case this time of just blanketing the airways with Latimer ads until you win the election, and it worked.
Okay, so they gave $68,593 to Chantel Brown. That's so that was Nina Turner's opponent. That's a lot less than they. I mean, anyway, I actually wasn't even aware of the racism. Well, I'll let this.
I think
speak.
that's just baked into any primary election. You gotta say,
Mhm.
well, this Jamal Bowman, he pulled the
Great.
fire alarm, and
Mhm. It's pretty clumsy here, and it's not confined to just one group. He's
Previously, Latimer through the ire back.
yeah, he has some
I'm not surprised that
agreement.
that
Take a
happened.
look at this.
You can only be in one demographic, and it's the philosophy of where we are heading is that you cannot be in office unless you have my identity. Then we're in a bad place.
In fairness, the caller did not say that, right? In fairness, the caller did not say that, right?
No, but what I'm saying is I'm responding to a question in my terms. He was, I think, pretty clear that she's not happy with me and that I can't represent her interest.
The Cuomo Emmett Till thing that she refers to, I think I have the text in front of me. You wrote, I think, on Facebook, in our world, no matter how heinous
I deleted it, Brian. I put it on Facebook.
I love how Latimer's trying to not let him read the fucking quote out.
Foolish tweet. I have said so, and I deleted it at the time. It is not reflective of the broader way that I deal with circumstances like this.
I mean,
I recognize it was a foolish set of words. It was hurtful to some people, and I deleted it.
Brian. It's not a big deal. I'm only being racist on Tuesdays. Stop it. Latimer also suggested that he was exempt from being guilty of racism because he appointed a black man to be his deputy county executive.
So he has a black.
No racist person around that. Latimer insisted just last month. He also suggested he couldn't be racist because he grew up in a black neighborhood, city, and state. Reported. This guy. Latimer employed similar logic after an endorsement from former New York Congressman Mondaire Jones, who was black. The argument about me running a racist campaign falls flat on its face when people who are African American, Latino, Asian are supporting me, Latimer told the New York Times earlier this month. During a debate last month, Latimer used terms to describe Bowman that are consistent with the angry black man trope, traditionally been employed as a racial fear-mongering tactic. He'd have done it against a black woman, too. Trust me, I know. That type of energy that Latimer supporters and surrogates have likely fed off of, that includes Terry DeGaetano, the vice chair of the Westchester County Democratic Committee, who told us how he really felt when she described Bowman on Facebook as being angry and suggested he suffered from a stroke. Wow. If your own umbrella party feels this way, who needs enemies? Weeks later, not only did Latimer, who again ran as a Democrat,
I wonder what
not
Fetterman's
denounce the
response
above
was to
examples
that.
of racist dog whistling, but he also went on to win the primary via tactics that could be used as a roadmap for Republicans and other conservative-leaning candidates. The 2024 general elections. News One with the details. Previously, though, Bowman made no secret of how he felt about Latimer's political tactics in the primary. It's unfortunate that George has decided that the best way to win an election is to divide our communities with a blatantly racist campaign.
I'm going to fast forward a little
Learn a
bit.
pair of mailers. We're still doing that.
Oh,
We're
wow.
still doing
about
that. Really?
They did, yeah, they.
It's just not enough
into
to go with the
skin and then-
traditional systemic racism. Latimer would also feature this man as a special guest at a fundraiser on May 30th. Enjoy this.
Ultimately, this is not something that only Jews should be happy about. This is something that affects all peoples. All people who stand up against hatred and bigotry should be championing the news from yesterday. So number one, we got to make sure that Harvard becomes finally the institution that it once sought out for itself, one whereby the freedom of speech, the free exchange of ideas, and intellectual diversity is championed, not the insistence of racial identity over intellectual worth, not the insistence of towing the party line. I think that's really been lost, not just under Claudine Gay's leadership, but in the last couple of years at Harvard and of higher education more broadly in the United States. We got to get away from this insidious ideology of DEI, this binary system of oppressor versus oppressed. We have to stop looking at people through the prism and through the lens of race, but really valuing their worth from an academic, from a social, from an intellectual lens.
Now that last sentence resonates with me.
So that's a good, speaking of Harvard, that's a good segue into what I wanted to address next. Hang on, let me just get some of my one of my other windows ready. The way, we've been keeping track of how campuses have retaliated against, or at a minimum just not defended anti-war protesters. Let's see. I believe okay, here's an article from the Harvard Crimson. Let me reshare. There we go. So sanctions against students and staff involved. Hang on. Placing 10 graduate students on probation, and barring 14 seniors from graduating. And then The Intercept has a very comprehensive piece here somewhere. Hang on, I'm just trying to go around around the Zoom controls, about professors who have been punished. Some of them Jewish professors. Okay, here we go. They describe it as a new McCarthyism. I think that's very accurate. Oh yes, and just a reminder that all 12 universities in the Gaza Strip have been reduced to rubble, and 90 professors killed. There, I remember seeing in one of those really sociopathic IDF videos from one of the young soldiers, where he says, "Oh, whoops, we dropped a bomb on your university, so you won't become engineers anymore." Okay, there have been scenes of faculty solidarity. Last week, faculty members at the New School in New York, which I went to college in New York, very close to there. It always seemed like a very progressive place to me. Launched the first faculty-led solidarity encampment, following the shuttering of the student encampment and mass arrests. And last April, dozens of professors and others from New York University, that's where I went, and I'm not proud of them now, formed a line around their protesting students as police were called to raid their encampment. Oh, actually, that was good of them. Faculty and students were all arrested together. Okay, so good on those NYU professors. All right, so here's one professor saying, "I was fired after 18 years as a professor of Latin American and Caribbean Studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice," said Danny Shaw, told last month by administrators of the college that he would not be reappointed to his long-term adjunct position. Let's see. I saw Genocide in motion, and I began to organize demonstrations and teach-ins, so that's why he was fired. And it mentions Canary Mission, which is one of several websites that doxes students and teachers for their activism, and brands them as anti-Semites, which I would imagine probably comes up if you Google somebody. I mean, it's just disgusting. And there's one particular example here of a Holocaust scholar who happens to be Jewish, who also lost his job for using the word genocide when there were not gas chambers involved. I guess that's a big mistake now. So, watch some of this.
Go Home by Angel Olsen. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We turn now to the acclaimed Holocaust and genocide scholar Ross Siegel. 8 months ago, the Israeli-American historian became one of the first scholars to accuse Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. Professor Siegel laid out his case in a widely read article for Jewish Currents, headlined, "A Textbook Case of Genocide." The piece's subtitle was, "Israel has been explicit about what it's carrying out in Gaza. Why isn't the world listening?" Professor Siegel went on to give numerous interviews, including to us on Democracy Now!
We need to recognize what's going on around us, what's unfolding in front of our eyes, which is really a textbook case of genocide with the rhetoric, with the actions, with everything involved.
Siegel's description of Israel's war on Gaza as a genocide has now cost him a job. Last week, the University of Minnesota withdrew an offer to Siegel for him to head the school's Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies after 2 of the center's board members resigned to protest his hiring. The school's decision also came after the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas launched a campaign to block Professor Siegel from getting the job. The group described him as a, quote, extremist. Ross Siegel joins us now. He's currently Associate Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey.
I mean, if
and
not
endowed
him, then
professor
who
in the
is
study
qualified
of modern
to
genocide. He's joining
decide
us
what
from
is or is not
Bulgaria.
genocide?
Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Professor Siegel. Can you explain exactly what happened? And is there a chance you will be re-offered this job?
Thank you, Amy, for inviting me again to the show. What happened is that there was a completely regular hiring process in a public university. There was a public announcement of the job. There were applications. There were Zoom interviews. There were campus visits. There was actually significant community engagement also during this process. And then eventually the search committee deliberated and made a recommendation to hire me to the interim dean of the College of Liberal Arts. I was then on the 5th of June sent an official job offer. And then, as you described, 2 professors who were formerly on the advisory committee of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at the University of Minnesota resigned. And together with the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Minnesota and the Dakotas, put a lot of pressure, which was really hateful campaigns of lies and distortions against me, and based on their political position and support of Israel. And on 10th of June, so within days, right, the interim president of the University of Minnesota sent me an email withdrawing the job offers. Idea that the only way to be Jews today is to be Zionists and to support Israel. And as I said, the opposite is true. It's not that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitism, not at all. Criticizing the people who criticize Israel in this way, this is anti-Semitic. This is an attack on Jewish identities. This is an attack actually on people who are aiming to criticize a violent state in order to protect a group facing state violence, which is actually very much in line with the historical struggle against anti-Semitism. So this is really a world turned upside down, and in the frame of this world turned upside down, we also see the end of the academic world, of academic freedom, of free inquiry, of teaching and research.
So that's interesting. It never really occurred to me that some retaliation could be directed specifically towards Jewish or Israeli people who are critical, or I suppose maybe considered disloyal, which is a really, really toxic trope, that because there's already within anti-Semitism, there's this trope of dual loyalty, or that or that they're that being Jewish can inherently mean that Israel is your country and that you're compromised. So that's interesting to hear from him. That was something I hadn't heard. It looks like Rick has I've either been disconnected or possibly had to go take
Oh, I
care of
didn't see a message from him,
his
but
family.
probably just, yeah. But I mean, this would be an okay topic to end on. But you know, just to say, uh, the whole, you know, Jewish, I think it's called Blood Libel. I'm not 100% sure
Yeah,
what
that's
it's
the thing.
called, but it's the it's such, you know, it's such a devious tactic on behalf of Israel to use in order to sort of justify, not sort of justify, they are definitely using it to try to justify not only their own actions, but they're also using it to like silence dissenters, basically saying like, you know, you're no real Jew if you do not support Israel. And unfortunately, it's kind of been working. Like it hasn't worked against them yet because, you know, your average American doesn't know a Jewish person. You know, I mean, me and
Really?
you, we grew up in, no, it's very true. Like me and you, we grew up in New York. So it's not, you know, it's very weird to think that, you know, I grew up around Jewish people my entire life. But when I
Yeah,
moved out to where I
likewise.
am now, yeah, when I moved out to where I am here now, there's not a single like halal shop anywhere. There's like, you know, I'm like, oh right, that's, you know, there's a lot of Jewish people. Like, you know, there's concentrations in very specific places, but like, you know, it's not widespread enough. So people are typically, you know, they're bound to just uh believe in tropes, right? And so unfortunately, the one that uh has taken a hold of a lot of Americans is that, you know, Israel equals Jewish, you
Yeah.
know, and a lot of them are unaware that it's very much a multicultural, multi-religious region where
Before it
you
was
know,
Israel
there
too.
exactly before it was Israel, like, you know, Joe Biden is older than the state of Israel. And you
Yeah,
know,
actually, you're right. Yes.
yeah.
So is George Soros.
Oh yeah.
Um,
But it's
but,
it is ridiculous to
yeah.
sadly see.
And it's something that I've found really irritating is that a lot of right wingers, you know, who are supporting Israel, they, you know, use the term Israeli as interchangeable with Jewish people all the time, which, you know, is I've always I consider that anti-Semitic. But when it's done, you know, in defense of Zionism, you know, it's tolerated. I mean, it's tolerated by people who feel the same way. You know, yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge that there are people within Israel protesting this war, and there are Jewish organizations, you know, if not now, Jewish Voice for Peace, and also the Jewish professor, and other professors, Jewish students that have suffered as a result of, you know, calling for a ceasefire. You know, what a controversial thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's, you know, and anyone who can, like, you know, see the forest for the trees knows that this is not a conflict that is meant to protect any particular ethnic group. It is and like I don't even like calling it a war. You know, the conflict in Israel is just to eliminate one group, and that is like, you know, and it just so happens like the most advantageous thing you can do is to weaponize people's ignorance and, you know, just their knee-jerk reaction to say, well, you know, what about October 7th? You know, mind you, it was last year, and October 7th doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like it didn't just
Oh,
happen
yeah,
because,
absolutely.
you know, because Islamic State decided, oh, we're going to attack, you know, Israel because we want to kill all Jews. No, but you know, but of course, like, you know, anyone who says that is like, well, do you, that means you can support Hamas's actions? No, No sane person does. No sane person would condone murder, rape, and just, you know, and what have you. But that is how, you know, October 7th has been framed by Israel. Like, you know,
And
they've
yeah.
taken, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, just there are historical examples of this happening to immiserated populations. I don't know if you ever there's a content creator, the Cavernacle, who's a history major. He's British. He's a little younger than me. He's a Marxist. He's fantastic. And he did a video where he gave multiple examples. I think Haiti was one.
Oh, right.
Czechoslovakia, you know, and the Nazis, of, you know, when people feel like they have no other choice, you know, it doesn't make violence okay, but it is what tends to happen. And he also used South Africa as an example where that you know, didn't happen because of Nelson Mandela, but you know, the leadership in Israel, I mean, not only are they perfectly aware that that's what happens, and that Hamas recruits much more heavily when there is violence against Palestinians, but we now know that there was, it's comparable to 9/11, the advanced knowledge, not only that they were planning something, but just some specific details about that, what they were planning, which was something it's probably worth discussing in more detail. I mean, a lot of people have already been discussing that, and you know, I guess the big question is, you know, was this opportunism, you know, to go into Gaza, or was it hubris? Well,
I think it was definitely hubris on behalf of Israel. It's like, you know, they not took for granted. It's just like they saw the writing on the wall and they just said, you know, what could they possibly do? You know, so I see like the conspiracy, like, say, oh, it was planned, or oh, Israel allowed this to happen. I don't think so. I don't think they allowed this to happen as much as the United States allowed 9/11. You know, they just didn't heed the warning, and you know, what happened happened.